call it an evening. Appreciate it.
I think you should have demanded that he bring us a guitar and do his act. I've seen that on YouTube. He sings.
That's
he
another
sings
story,
too.
isn't it? Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm going to keep an eye on the clock because I'm used to talking for long periods of time, sometimes an hour, hour and a half. I was on a radio show in Indianapolis the other day, and a 2-hour radio show. So I'm used to going on the radio and talking for long periods of time, and I tend to ramble because I normally don't plan too much. So I take a little notes about what I want to say. First of all, speaking of the radio, I want to let everybody know that there's a program that Tim has been on. I don't know if Clyde has been on or not. I know Tim has. Jim Mann is on this program quite a bit too. I'm on too much. I wish somebody else would take my place. But it's called Just Let Me Teach. It's on the Indiana Talks radio website. So you just go to Google, type in Indiana Talks, and you can listen to it live 9 p.m. every Wednesday night. So it's going to be on tonight. The person who does this show is Justin Oakley. You may remember Justin Oakley because he ran for the State Board of Education before Glenda Ritz started her campaign. He ran against Tony Bennett and traveled across the state. So he wrote a blurb to this book too. So I just wanted to let everybody know that because I know Jim and I both take out advertising for this radio show. And I know I get a lot out of it because most of the books I sell are across the state. I don't sell too many copies in my own backyard, but I sell a lot across Indiana. And I don't think there's enough people in this area that know about this show, so if we can give Jim some help to get teachers and local community leaders to know about this show when Jim goes on, or when I go on, I think it will help him help his campaign out. So it's called Just Let Me Teach, and it's on Indiana Talks. Okay, I also want to make an announcement. The Nancy Sauer School of Theatrical Dancing is doing their 60th anniversary circus dance tour this summer. So I wanted to give a shout out to them. My understanding is they plan on putting the two-step over the I-step. So it's a great bunch of kids, great bunch of adults that run that. So they gave me a shirt, so I wanted to say something about that. Also, I want to say something too about, I want to thank Senator Skinner and Clyde Kersey for getting Danny Tanoos the Sagamore Award. I'm sure everybody knows that. That was announced, was it 2 days ago maybe? Danny works very hard to support public education. He's one of the most vocal school superintendents in the state, and he deserves that award, so I'm glad that that took place. There's not all of the superintendents of the schools across Indiana are as vocal or as supportive of the kids and the teachers in their communities, so he rightfully deserves that award, so I wanted to mention that, which ties into a section of my book. Danny Tanoos was on the state board at one point, and the woman who took his spot on the state board was named Gwen Adell. I happened to be when I started writing about the so-called school reform in Indiana, I was way deep into the Google blogs. And I came across this website that claimed that this woman, Gwen Adell, who was on the State Board of Education under Daniels, took Danny's spot, had plagiarized her PhD dissertation. Now, I have a PhD. It's in English, basically English. I'll just simplify it. It's not more technical than that, but it's in English. And I ordered the original dissertations this lady had plagiarized from, and it was just shocking, to say the least. So I contacted Mitch Daniels' office. I contacted as many people as I could at Purdue where this copying took place. Really didn't get anywhere till the Journal-Gazette in Fort Wayne picked up the story, and it became an Associated Press story. And at this time, Daniels went into the newspaper in Fort Wayne and took a pop shot at me, saying that I was more worried about politics than I was about plagiarism, which I find highly insulting, because if you've ever done a PhD and you've ever written a book like this, or my first book on Walt Whitman, you know that you take plagiarism and copying other people's work very seriously. It's an academic sin to people who have went through the torture of actually doing this type of research. So I wanted to mention, that's one of the things that happens in my book. I wanted to talk about the tie-in, Danny's Award. Now, to give an overview of the book, basically it details the assault on Indiana schools, which kicks into gear in 2011 after these bills were passed to expand charter schools in the state, school vouchers, things of that nature. The shocking thing that most people find about this book is most of the people I detail do not live in Indiana. Most of them are billionaires across the country. One of them is Betsy DeVos, whose family runs the Amway Corporation. Her brother is named Eric Krentz, who did the Blackwater military outfit that went over to all these wars. And she has been behind this quest to privatize education across the country for years now. So she's a player. Jeb Bush is a big player. Jeb Bush has there's more sections on Jeb Bush in the book than there are Tony Bennett. That's why I like to say Jeb Bush was really the superintendent of education when Bennett was in charge, because Bennett was simply a lapdog. Now, one thing to remember, though, is Bennett being a lapdog, a lot of people misunderstood that, but it worked out in the teachers' and schools' favor, because when Ritz ran her campaign, there were enough teachers and administrators across Indiana and even parents upset about what was going on that Bennett became the villain. So I think one thing to remember is when some of the people in our district who have been involved in taking some of this money run this time against Tim and Clyde and Jim and Mark Spelbring, one way you might want to frame it is that these people are the villains, the same type of villains that Bennett were, because we need to get teachers roused up. Teachers are not aware in this state, especially in this city. I have sold. I work as an aide in one of the schools here, and I've sold some books to some teachers in that building, but only 3 copies to teachers outside that building. So we need to, for the campaigns to work here, we need to have a movement to try to get to teachers to understand what is going on. So if we irritate enough teachers and they step up to the plate again, as they did when Ritz was elected, I think it will work out for everybody. The worst thing about all that was they missed the bigger picture, and they put in the same Republicans in office who were responsible for passing these bills. The main money coming into Indiana comes from the DeVos Amway crowd, and also from the Waltons of the Walmart store. And there are several hedge fund managers. One of them is tied into Jeb Bush, who lives in Florida, and a few other people. James Bopp Jr. was involved in all this, to give it another Terre Haute connection. So this pact it's called the Hoosiers for Economic Growth Pact, is where they were funneling all this money to these Republicans in the state. And this is still active. John Warren, his name John, right? Was defeated. He was pretty much pro-public education. He was a Republican, but my understanding he was pro-public education. He was defeated recently, as we all know. The week of the primary, that money was coming into his bank account. I went through the campaign records. I also, found some other shocking things. I don't want to say publicly at this point because I haven't completely verified it 100%, but there are other shocking things in this community that I discovered while going through these campaign records. So this money is still coming in, and it's going to come in more, so we need to be aware of that. Well, back to the book. Basically, it tracks all this money. It ties in all these people involved. In the press release, it says something about how I tie school vouchers to torture, how I show people breaking open door laws. I describe felons, plagiarists, crony banksters, people who did time in prison and people who should have done time in prison. Child abusers, and even 2 prostitutes. I was doing a national radio show, and this guy says, you have to talk about this last thing you just mentioned. I said, well, they're not major players, but there are a couple of stories illegal activities, sexual activities. So I want to say too, and then I don't want to talk too long, but I want to just give you some idea about what others have said about the book. Most of two words come up when people review the book. One of them is frightening and one of them is scary. And this quote, Diane Ravage, how many people here know who Diane Ravage is? Okay, Diane Ravage wrote a blurb for the book, and her blurb, where's the book? I have it. Okay, it says, one of the most frightening works I have read about the corporate reform takeover of public education. So that was one of the quotes that has the word frightening. There was another person who teaches at a university, I believe it's up north, who wrote, this is one of the scariest books I have ever read. If only it were a work of fiction. I believe in public education. I cannot believe that in a country as great as ours, it has come to this. Okay. Now there's another Democrat named Daymon Brodhacker. Has anybody ever heard of him? He's in the Martinsville area. He wrote a little piece for my press release too. He's running in District 16 for the Indiana House of Representatives. He's also a retired principal from one of these public Indiana schools. And he says, warning, Hoosier School Heist will shock and make you angry. In an unbiased fashion, Doug Martin uncovers how the public education takeover crisis in Indiana was manufactured to benefit special interests in the politicians who serve them. This book will make you sick from what they have done and what they are doing to you and your children. Now that term, manufactured crisis, there was a book that came out in 1995 by a psychology professor and a sociology professor who traced all of this stuff about school reform back to the Nation at Risk report that Reagan did in the early 80s, and how the same, if you read this book, the shocking thing about that book is it's the same arguments these people use today, the same exact talking points. So what they do is they do this research. A lot of it is slanted research. A lot of it just downright propaganda. They hire really smart people to put this stuff together, and they feed it through these think tanks to the media. So when you turn on your local TV channel, you're only getting half of the story, or you're getting a totally different reality of what all this really means. And this has been well planned since the 1980s. So this book in 1995 talks about, goes in and tracks all this and debunks all this propaganda and this fake research. And when you read it, it's the same story today. They've just updated the research, added another funny, survey or whatever, and it's the same story over and over. So I think it's important that we all know this, and it's also important that we try to get this out into the community, because it's really difficult to get people to see what's going on. I was speaking at the Southwest, or maybe Southeast Community Task Force in Indianapolis a few weeks ago, where a lot of these charter schools detailed in my book, that is the center where these people are operating. So the crowd was very interesting, because there were people who were totally on my side and people who did not like me. So I had a woman from the Indiana Department of Education. She went off about how there's not a manufactured crisis. This stuff is real. And I thought to myself, this lady has no idea what's going on, and she refused to buy my book. I don't care. This book is not about making money. If I wanted to make money, I'd be working for the billionaires and all this. If I wanted to make money. But it told me that a lot of people are not aware, and I don't want to say, that's not a reflection of Glenda Ritz's office, I don't think. Glenda Ritz is on it. Glenda Ritz cares about schools and teachers and is trying her best to stop this assault against public schools. But there are people floating around in this department who are buying into all of this. So I guess what I want to stress is to try to educate people. I know a lot of this, the book, there's a guy named Jason Waller who's a laborer. He runs the United Auto Workers local in Greencastle. And they're putting together an event for me. And I was talking to him last night. in Clay County, and he's a very smart young man, and he's reading another book by a labor professor, and he said, well, your book's a lot easier to read than this labor professor's book. And I thought, well, that's great, because the book is written towards a more general audience. There's a lot of research. It took me 6,000 hours at least to put this book together. But it is, I don't think it's boring, to say the least. A lot of these books written about this stuff, they're very boring. I don't think this is very boring. I think it's pretty hard-hitting from the get-go, and somewhat of an easy read. So I guess I would ask you if you could just spread the word about what is going on to help people like Tim and Clyde and Jim and Mark, because I believe that, you know, these are the candidates that need to be in office. There's no question about that in my mind. And I hope we can all kind of get the troops together, spread the word, get the teachers involved on what is going on, and get these people elected. One more thing, I will be at the Vigo County Library on June the 7th. I'll be signing books. It's in the lobby. The Tribune Star, they have the Bash periodical. They're going to do, I think, an 800-word story on the book a few days before that. So if you know any teachers, please let them know. So thank you for your time.
Appreciate it, brother.